Have you ever had a single moment make you look at someone you love in a completely different way? A moment so unexpected that your heart races and your thoughts feel scrambled. That's exactly what happened to me not long ago, and even now, I'm still processing it. My older brother, Liam, someone I thought I knew better than anyone, asked me something so unusual, so completely out of nowhere, that for a split second I honestly believed I'd misheard him. I didn't see it coming, and I definitely didn't expect how his question would change the way I saw him and myself. Before I dive into what happened, I want you to do something for me. Think about where you are right now. Which city are you watching from? I like to imagine people listening in from all over the world. Maybe you're sipping tea in London, enjoying the breeze in Cape Town, or curled up on your couch somewhere in Canada or the US. Wherever you are, I want you to picture this scene with me. A quiet Sunday afternoon. Sunlight filtering through thin curtains, the faint smell of something baking in the oven drifting in from the kitchen, and me, sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, phone in my hand, trying to ignore this strange, tightening feeling in my chest. It all started earlier that morning. Liam had come into my room with a look I didn't recognize. Vulnerability doesn't usually fit him. It's not how he moves through the world. But there he was, leaning in my doorway, one shoulder against the frame, rubbing the back of his neck like he was wondering if he should just turn around and leave. "Hey, Mia," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Can I talk to you about something?" I stopped mid-scroll and looked up. He was wearing that old dark green hoodie I've stolen from his closet 1,000 times, sleeves pushed up, hem a little frayed. Even dressed like that, in comfortable, worn-out clothes, he still carried that quiet, unshakable confidence he always has. The kind that used to make me feel like the messy one in comparison. "Yeah, of course," I said, putting my phone aside. "What's going on?" He shifted his weight, his foot tapping a slow, nervous rhythm on the floor. For a second, I almost smiled. Liam, of all people, looking nervous. It didn't match the version of him I was used to. He's always been the calm one, the steady one, like he's walking through life with some secret map the rest of us don't have. But this wasn't about borrowing my car or asking me to cover for him. His eyes met mine, serious and searching, and something in my stomach flipped. This was different. "I need to ask you something kind of strange," he said at last. Strange. That was the understatement of the year. When Liam says something is kind of strange, it usually ends up being the kind of thing that shakes the ground under your feet. I tried to keep my tone light, playful, because the last thing I wanted was to spook him and make him back off. "Okay," I said. "Strange how?" He hesitated again. I could see the tension tightening his shoulders, like he was bracing himself. Then he just said it. The words came out rushed, but clear. Words that made my stomach drop, my heart stumble, and my thoughts scatter in a way I didn't see coming. "Do you ever wonder what we'd be like if we weren't related?" I went completely still. My mind snagged on the question, caught somewhere between disbelief and confusion. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though a part of me already suspected where this was going. He dragged a hand through his hair, jaw clenched, gaze drifting down to the floor. "I mean, if we hadn't grown up in the same house, if we'd met as strangers in some other place, do you think we'd get along? Would we still be close? But in ways that aren't just about being family." I let out a nervous laugh, shaking my head as if that could shake off the heavy feeling blooming in my chest. "Liam, that's a really weird thing to ask," I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant it to. Weird didn't really cover it. And yet, even as I tried to brush it off, I couldn't ignore the tightness behind my ribs, or the way his eyes looked under all that hesitation. There was something raw there, something open. It didn't feel flirty. It didn't feel romantic. It felt complicated, like he was showing me a part of himself I'd never been allowed to see before. And somehow, that made me feel closer to him than I'd felt in years, even as it made me question where my own boundaries even were. We just sat there for a while after that, not speaking, the kind of silence that hums, full of questions that haven't found their words yet. I watched the sunlight slide slowly across the rug, sawdust drifting in the air, and tried to make sense of what his question had stirred up inside me. How could one single question feel like someone had opened a hidden door inside a familiar house? A door I'd walked past my entire life and never noticed. Eventually, I let out a small laugh, part disbelief, part relief. "You're ridiculous," I said, nudging him gently with my shoulder. "But I think I kind of get what you're trying to say." He smiled then, a little awkward, a little shy. He crossed the room and sat down beside me on the floor. Our knees touched lightly. The sunlight made soft patterns on the carpet. The whole moment was strange and yet weirdly right. Familiar and new at the same time. It felt like the beginning of a conversation we'd never had before. A conversation about where the lines are, about trust, about seeing each other as more than the roles we'd always played. And just like that, something in the air shifted. The tension loosened its grip. The questions didn't disappear, but the way we looked at each other changed. There was respect there, a quiet agreement that this wasn't about breaking boundaries or crossing into something it shouldn't. It was about recognizing that beneath the label of siblings, we were also two whole, complicated people. I had never imagined a single question could feel that important. But that day, with sunlight warming the floor and my brother sitting just inches away, I realized emotional discovery doesn't always come with drama and fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as a question that sounds strange, until you realize what it really means. And that's when I knew this was a moment I would never forget. After that unsettling Sunday, things didn't simply snap back to how they were. Not completely. When someone you've known forever asks something that cracks open your sense of normal, it doesn't just vanish from your mind. Even now, when I think back, I can almost feel that moment hanging between us like a note held just a second too long. I tried to throw myself back into my routines. Classes, friends, scrolling endlessly through social media. But every time Liam walked into the room, I'd notice it again. That same flicker in his eyes. That brief hesitation. It wasn't uncomfortable, exactly. It was fragile, like we were both aware we were walking over something thin and delicate. But at the same time, we both knew it wouldn't break. At least, not if we were careful. A few nights later, I found him alone in the living room. He was stretched out across the couch, one arm behind his head, headphones in, completely lost in his music. Outside, the sun was slipping down, turning the sky soft pink and orange. The smell of dinner, roasted vegetables, garlic, something rich and comforting, floated in from the kitchen. I stopped in the doorway and just watched him for a moment. "Hey," I said softly as I stepped inside. He pulled out one earbud, looked over, and gave me a small, familiar smile. "Hey," he replied. "You okay?" I shrugged and moved closer, perching carefully on the arm of the sofa. The fabric felt worn and soft under my hand, and laundry soap, a hint of cologne, and something that was just him. "Yeah," I said, just thinking about stuff. He tilted his head. I could see the curiosity there, tinged with something gentler, more cautious. "What kind of stuff?" he asked. I hesitated. My mind spun briefly through all the tangled thoughts I'd been carrying. Should I tell him? Should I admit how much his question had gotten under my skin? "About you?" I said finally. "About us?" His eyes widened just a little, and he sat up more, resting an arm along the back of the sofa. "Us," he repeated. "Yeah," I said, trying to find the right words. "I mean, I've always seen you as my big brother, right? That's just how it's always been. But after what you asked me, I started thinking about who you are outside of that. Like who you'd be if you weren't just my brother. And maybe I've never really paid attention to that part of you." He went quiet. I could see the thoughts turning in his head, the way his gaze dropped for a second before coming back to meet mine. "Mia," he said slowly, "I didn't mean to make things weird between us. I just wanted to be honest, with you, with myself, about how I think about people, about us, about how we fit into each other's lives." I swallowed, feeling that same pressure in my chest from before. "I know," I said gently, "and I'm glad you were honest. It's just a lot to think about." We fell into silence again, but it wasn't empty. The room felt full of warmth and tension and unspoken things. Outside, the sky kept darkening, shadows stretching longer across the floor. The whole house felt like it had paused, like it was giving us space to figure this out. I guess what I've been trying to say, he continued eventually, his voice low, is that I've always admired you. Not just as my little sister, but as you. You see things other people ignore. You feel everything so deeply. You make me question myself in a good way, like who I am, what I care about. You change the way I see things. I blinked, surprised by how much that hit me. Lim, I started, but he gently stopped me with a small shake of his head. Let me finish, he said quietly. I'm not asking for anything to change. I'm not trying to mess with what we are. I just needed you to know that I don't only see you as my sister. I see you as a person, a real person, and I really hope we can talk more honestly about all of it, even if it feels weird sometimes. My throat tightened. His words felt like they were settling into a place inside me that had been waiting, without me realizing. I see you too, I said finally. More than I've let myself admit. I think I've been scared to really look, but I do see you. And I want to keep talking. Even if it's complicated, even if we stumble through it. He smiled then. A real one, the kind that lights up his whole face. Good, he said. That's all I wanted. We ended up talking for almost an hour, not about what to cook next week, not about chores, not about what show to binge. We talked about our fears, our hopes, the weird little worries we usually try to laugh off. Liam admitted how tired he sometimes feels of always being the strong one, the reliable one everyone depends on. How afraid he is of failing, of not being enough. I confessed how lost I sometimes feel thinking about my future, how scared I am that I'll never figure out where I belong. It was deeper than most conversations we'd ever had. Not dramatic, not intense in a bad way, just honest, quietly, deeply honest. I realized in that moment that his strange question had never really been about some hypothetical scenario where we weren't siblings. It was his way of asking, if you saw all of me, would you still stay? When Mom called us down for dinner, we left that room with something new between us. Not a new label, not a new role, just a new layer, a kind of closeness built on mutual respect, on the decision to keep seeing each other clearly, even when it's uncomfortable. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how the tiniest shifts can change so much. One question, one brave, awkward question had nudged us into a new space. I realized then that not all important moments are loud or obvious. Sometimes the biggest changes happen in small, quiet rooms, in everyday light, between two people deciding to finally show each other who they really are. Liam's question had felt bizarre at first, almost inappropriate. But by now, I understood it differently. It wasn't about crossing a forbidden line. It was about vulnerability. It was about the courage it takes to say, "This is how I see you. This is how I feel." For the first time, I felt like we were walking side by side, not just as brother and sister, but as two people growing, learning, and choosing to trust each other with things we didn't have to share. The next few days moved by in a blur of small, ordinary moments that somehow felt brighter. I'd catch myself noticing things about him I'd never really paid attention to. The way he always double-checked the locks before bed. The way he instinctively moved aside to let people pass on a crowded sidewalk. The way he got quiet when someone else talked about their dreams, like he was measuring his own against them. That Friday, gray clouds hovered low outside, and rain tapped a calm rhythm against the windows. I curled up on the couch with a steaming mug of tea, listening to the steady patter on the roof. Across the room, at the dining table, Liam sat hunched over his sketchbook, completely absorbed in whatever he was drawing. I watched him from the corner of my eye, his brow furrowed in that familiar way. His pencil moved in careful, deliberate strokes. He'd pause, sit back, consider, then lean in again. That quiet focus was something I'd seen 100 times but never really seen until now. "You're pretty quiet today," I said at last, setting my mug down. He looked up slowly, his eyes meeting mine. There it was again, that flicker of hesitation I'd come to recognize. "Just thinking," he said. "About life, I guess. About everything." I shifted, pulling my feet up under me. want to talk about it." He thought for a second, then nodded and motioned for me to come over. I crossed the room and sat at the table beside him, folding my legs under the chair, feeling the cool wood under my palms. "It's this feeling," he said. "Like everyone expects me to always have it together. To be the logical one, the calm one. And most of the time I can do it. But there's this whole other part of me that feels lost, that doubts myself, that wants to mess up or be scared or not know what I'm doing. And I hide that from almost everyone. It's exhausting." I listened, really listened. "Liam," I said softly, resting my hand lightly on his arm. "You're allowed to be all of that. You're allowed to be unsure. The fact that you feel those things doesn't make you less. It makes you real." He stared at me for a moment like he was trying to decide if he believed me. Then something in his expression softened. "I think that's why I asked what I did the other day," he admitted quietly. "About if we'd still be close if we weren't family. I think I was testing something. Trying to figure out if you see me, the real me, and if you'd still care." The emotion in my throat rose back up again. "Hot and tight," I said. "I always have. I just didn't know how to say it. Or maybe I didn't realize how much I needed to." We fell into another silence, not empty, but comfortable. The rain outside was just a soft whisper now. The world felt narrowed down to this table, this room, and the fragile honesty we were building between us. Later, when the rain eased to a drizzle, we decided to go for a walk. The air outside was cool and clean, that earthy smell of wet pavement and damp leaves filling our lungs. We walked slowly, side by side, our hands buried in our pockets, our shoulders almost but not quite brushing. "Do you ever think about where you'll be in 10 years? I asked suddenly. "All the time," he said with a half laugh. "And every time I do, I feel both excited and terrified. I don't have a clear picture. I don't know if I'm on the right path. But talking to you about it, it makes it feel like less of a weight I'm carrying alone." "I feel that way too," I admitted, like I'm trying to build a life out of puzzle pieces and half of them are face down. But having you to talk to, it helps. It makes the chaos feel a little less chaotic. We didn't talk much more after that. We didn't need to. The quiet itself felt like a kind of answer. A reminder that you don't always need to fix someone else's problems to make a difference. Sometimes, just walking beside them is enough. By the time we got back home, the sky had cleared into a pale blue, and a thin crescent moon already hung over the rooftops. Inside, the house felt warmer than it had in a long time. Not physically, emotionally. Like it was holding all of our shared words, our confessions, our small brave truths. That night, in bed, I stared into the darkness and thought about everything his one strange question had set in motion. I thought about how easy it is to live beside someone for years and never really see them, to assume you know them fully just because you've memorized their habits and moods, and how powerful it is when, one day, you're both brave enough to say, "There's more to me, and I want you to know it." In just a few days, I had learned more about Liam than I had in some entire years of our lives. More about myself, too. About the kind of person I want to be for the people I love, the kind who listens, who notices, who doesn't run away when things feel confusing. Our relationship hadn't turned into something else. It had deepened into a version of itself I didn't know was possible. Not just siblings by blood, but partners in navigating life. Honestly, imperfectly, together. A few mornings later, that new reality hit me even more clearly. I was in the kitchen making coffee, the rich smell filling the air, steam curling lazily from the mug. The morning light spilled in, soft and golden, catching flecks of dust in the air. Liam appeared in the doorway with his sketchbook tucked under his arm. His hair was still a little messy from sleep, and for a second I just watched him, noticing the shadow of a smile at the corner of his mouth, the faint freckles I'd never really paid attention to. "Morning," I said, without turning away from the counter. "Morning," he replied, hopping up to sit on the edge of the counter like he always does. There was a familiar ease about him, but also that subtle intensity in his gaze that I'd grown used to lately. "How's your day starting?" he asked. "Quiet." "Good so far," I said. "Yours?" He shrugged lightly. Pretty good. Been thinking a lot, though. About what? I asked, even though I already had a sense. He paused, then said, about us. About what it actually means to be close to someone. I turned to face him fully, leaning back against the counter with my coffee cupped in both hands. I used to think being close just meant, sharing space, watching the same shows, eating dinner together. He continued, but now I think it's more than that. Being close means you don't have to hide. You can be yourself without worrying it'll scare the other person away. And I've realized that with you I can do that. And I really don't want to lose that. My chest tightened in that achy, grateful way again. I feel the same, I said quietly. I think I've wanted that for a long time. I just didn't know how to ask for it, or how to start. But now that we have, I don't ever want to go back to pretending everything's fine when it's not. He smiled, slow and genuine. Then we won't, he said simply. We'll keep this no matter how messy life gets. Deal, I said. We stood there in that warm kitchen, our hands brushing now and then as we reached for sugar or milk, and I felt this deep, steady peace settle in. Not the kind of peace that says, everything will always be perfect, but the kind that says, no matter what happens, you're not alone in it. A year later, we went out for another walk. The leaves had shifted into full autumn, gold, red, and orange fluttering around us with every gust of wind. We talked about small things this time, music, movies, places we wanted to travel someday, and somewhere between one conversation and the next, I realized something important. Those awkward questions, those strange, uncomfortable confessions, those moments when you feel exposed and uncertain, they aren't obstacles getting in the way of love. They are the way. They're the doors you have to walk through if you want a relationship that's real, not just polite, not just familiar. Liam's question hadn't been some dark hint at something inappropriate. It had been the start of a deeper kind of honesty, one that let both of us say, I'm more than the role you've always seen me in. Will you still choose me knowing that? By the time we got home, the sun was high, pouring golden light into the living room. We sank into the sofa together, him sketching absently, me sipping tea and letting my mind wander. The house hummed softly around us with the sound of distant traffic, the ticking clock, the quiet rise and fall of our breathing. I thought then about how strange life is, how the moments that scare us, the questions that make our hearts race, often end up leading us exactly where we needed to go. Liam's question had unsettled me at first. It had made me nervous. But now, sitting beside him in that gentle afternoon light, I knew I wouldn't trade that moment for anything, because it had given us something priceless, a deeper connection, a stronger trust, a shared understanding that we would face whatever came next with open eyes and open hearts, not just as brother and sister by default, but as two people who had chosen to see each other, really see each other, and stay. In the end, I realized this: sometimes the smallest questions light up the biggest truths, and sometimes the purest, most respectful kind of love appears in the quietest ways, in a simple, shaky sentence that changes everything. That was Liam's gift to me, a question that opened a door I hadn't known was there, a chance to know him more fully, a chance to be known in return, and that is a gift I will carry with me for the rest of my life.